everybody, my name is Michaela Schick and this is my Module 1 video. I apologize, Screencast-O-Matic does not work properly on my computer, so I have to open it like that every time. First, some introductory information about me. So I live in Overland Park, Kansas. I graduated from the University of Kansas in 2016. So I'm a huge Jayhawks fan, and I have my bachelor's degree in elementary education. I'm currently working on my master's degree in educational leadership or building administration, whatever you'd like to call it, and I'm expected to graduate in May of 2019, so I'm almost done. This is my third to last class for this program. Currently, I am not exactly sure what I would like to do with my career once I eventually leave classroom teaching. I am not sure if I'd like to go into some sort of administrative role, if I'd like to work for some sort of nonprofit that has to deal with education, if I'd like to go into lobbying for education issues. I know that I'll always be around the field of education in some way, but I'm just not exactly sure what shape that's going to take in the future. Next, about my school, I work at Emerson Elementary, which is in Kansas City, Kansas. This is my third year teaching there, and I've taught 5th grade all 3 years. I absolutely love where I work. It is an amazing school, and I would not trade it for anything. We serve a primarily Hispanic and African American student population, and most of our students are also from low-income families. This is a really community-based school, so we only have about 190 students, which for our district and for generally schools in the Kansas City area, this is very small for an elementary school. So we really have an active neighborhood around our school, and it's really great to see that community presence. And then also, I would say that my school is pretty well respected within our district. Data analysis experiences. So first at the school or district level, so kind of this focuses mostly on our district. The new superintendent that we have this year is much more focused on data than past administrators have been. So we are seeing a lot of shakeups in our district based on test scores and primarily based on Kansas assessment test scores. So we are now taking, I believe it's 3 different interim Kansas assessments throughout the year. To show us more data about our students. And then most recently, the major change that happened was we have instructional coaches at all of our schools, and recently they decided to restructure the elementary instructional coaches. So they essentially ranked every elementary school in the district based on Kansas assessment scores, and the top 6 elementary schools had their instructional coaches removed from the building, and those instructional coaches were placed elsewhere in order to better serve the student population is the idea. So my school actually just recently lost our instructional coaches because of data-based decisions. We regularly discuss data both at school meetings and at district meetings. Primarily areas of focus are, again, the Kansas Assessment, or CAP, MAP, which is Measures of Academic Progress, F&P, which is Fountas and Pinnell, which is a reading test that secondary teachers might not be familiar with, but it's pretty commonly used in elementary schools. As well as just your general classroom tests. So if you give a math test to students, or if you're taking notes during a reading group, or you're taking notes on their writing during writing time or something like that. Teachers, I feel like, are not always clued in on district decisions based on data. If a new program's rolling out, they're not saying, well, this is to target this exact data point. We're just hearing, here's a new program, let's use it. And also, I don't think the district's doing a great job of modeling and teaching teachers how they can use data in their own classrooms to make instructional choices. I feel like there's kind of a disconnect. We talk about all these numbers, but we don't talk about how to use them. And I feel like some schools in our area are doing a lot better job of this than others. The school that I was a student teacher at, I feel like did a better job of this than my current school. They broke down all of the MAP testing scores to the various strands and determined what students did and did not know based on those strands. So I think some schools are doing a better job of this than others in KCK. So my plan for how to improve this in our district is first to focus on data that we receive while students are still in our classroom. Taking the interim Kansas assessments will help with this, but focusing super hard on Kansas assessment data is really hard for teachers because a lot of times by the time we get Kansas assessment data, our students have already moved on to the next grade level. So that doesn't really help us to make instructional decisions for students sitting in our classroom. We also need to do a better job, like I said, of teaching teachers how to use this data. And primary areas that would be useful in classrooms would be to track student progress, to group students instructionally into different targeted area groups, and then defining content that needs to either be taught to students or retaught to students. Our district also needs to start looking at more longitudinal data to determine where students are kind of, I'm going to use air quotes here, but falling off. So recently another data thing that came up was we were in a pretty big district meeting where we had teachers from 9 different elementary schools in one area of our district, and saying it was all these 5th grade teachers in this meeting, and they began the meeting by saying, look at these 10th grade state assessment scores for the high school that all of your schools feed into, and these scores are very poor. To which all the 5th grade teachers, of course, respond, our 5th grade scores aren't that poor. What happened? So it kind of took the focus in a direction that it wasn't supposed to go in. And the district didn't really have an answer for, well, what changed? Why are you talking to 5th grade teachers about this? Maybe you need to be talking to 8th grade teachers about this. So it kind of created this very strange, tense meeting, but I don't think the district's necessarily looking at that longitudinal data always. And then also our district needs to expect improvement out of all of our schools, not just poorly performing ones. So as I stated, the district almost basically ranked all of our elementary schools recently and said, all right, if you're at the top, pat on the back, great job. And they're starting to remove resources from those schools. But I objectively think that as a better performing elementary school that I work at, we still have a lot of improvements that we should be making. Our scores objectively are not that great. Even if they might be better than some other schools, that doesn't mean they're good. So we still need to be working towards improving all of our schools in our district, not just poorly performing ones. On a personal level, I would consider myself pretty good at analyzing data. I consider myself a data nerd, and that's something that my colleagues kind of expect of me as well. After the meeting about the longitudinal test data for 10th graders, I actually made that Excel spreadsheet based on the KSDE data for Kansas assessment scores for all the different schools. So I have a giant spreadsheet on my computer right now that shows that longitudinal data. However, I don't know that I always do the best job of using finite data in my classroom. So something I'm currently working on right now as a way to improve is that I want to use anecdotal notes from my reading groups to better tailor instruction in the future for those different reading groups. So looking at what does this student need, what does this student need, and saying what's the best thing I could target for this group. And then data in my classroom often focuses on instructional grouping and reteaching cycles. So, students didn't understand adding fractions, how are we going to reteach that? However, we've had some curriculum changes this year that make it harder to group students because everything is kind of expected to be taught whole group, and then it's also harder to reteach things because of the pacing of our curriculum. So my personal plan for improvement is to analyze student data on a micro rather than macro level. So instead of just looking at how many of my students are above and below grade level in a certain topic, I need to look at students struggling with fluency and how can I group them and how can I teach them to be better at reading fluency, for example. And I also want to target areas that are going to have the biggest impact for my students. So some areas that I could reteach or teach are going to have bigger impacts than others as far as helping them to improve. So I want to focus on how do I find those big areas that can help them the most. And then I also need to focus on reteaching material that students aren't understanding. And in order to do that, I'm going to have to teach beyond my curriculum and teach student needs. So sometimes curriculum, I really like our new curriculums, but sometimes they aren't always perfect. And sometimes I'm going to need to go around them in order to make sure all my student needs are being met. Thank you for watching this video. I'm really looking forward to this class. As I said, I'm kind of a major data nerd, so I am looking forward to learning in this class with all of you. Thank you.